In the financial management lecture, strategy looked so neat and tidy. Models, matrices, perfect case studies. But when you enter the real world, it is anything but clean. It's grey and uncertain and forever shifting and changing, sometimes even as fickle as the financial markets themselves. Now, you see that strategy isn't a formula. It's an art. But how do you make the right bold moves when the rules aren't in the textbook? Once more, we are joined by Muhammed Ismail Bulbulia CA, founder and editor of myCAhub, and one of the youngest ever top 35 under 35 finalists in 2022. We chat about this thing called strategy, how it's not a science, but in fact an art. We also chat about why you need to fall in love with the problem, not the solution, the correct frame of mind when selling as a CA, ethics and how it actually manifests in our organizations, accountability versus responsibility in South Africa and the tragedy of commons problem we have as a result, and more. I hope you enjoy. My travelers on the road to CASA. Quick one. Don't stop. You are doing something that very few would dare to do. You are going the road less traveled. It might not feel like it. It might sound like you're not pursuing your dreams, quote unquote, in the throes of that passion that we would all love to be in 24/7, but trust me, you are going there. If you have not already, please go check out part 1 and part 2, and also check out myCAhub merch. Super fire, so good, so great, absolutely fantastic, such tremendous stuff. That is all linked in the show notes. In any case, on to part 3. You've mentioned this incredible business that you've managed to start, and you've managed to grow. And I wanted to know if there was one skill that you could not, if you were to go back to your starting days, that you could not do without, what would that skill be?
I'd say the skill that served me best that I had at the time of starting was communicating well. Mm-hmm. Being able to communicate my vision and what I wanted for the tasks from suppliers, about information about my product to my users, like developing good communication skills, which really came from my articles days, has really served me well. And I always go back to those and default to those when I'm writing an email, and I'm writing, copy a LinkedIn post, thinking about who's the intended user, what would they gain from this, what am I trying to convey. The skill that I learned in my entrepreneurial journey over the last 4 years that has been the most useful has been learning how to sell, learning sales. And sales is the lifeblood of every business, and it's the number one skill that every entrepreneur has to learn, and I would highly recommend anybody to learn, because you are always selling a product. You're selling yourself, to the world. When you present yourself, whether it's in a work context or a relationship context, or even normally, it's how the way you present yourself is how you show others they should treat you. It's how you show others that this is the way that they should interact with you. If you appear slovenly, if you all hunched over, if you don't respect you, if you appear as if you don't respect yourself, others won't respect you from the get-go. But if you put on an air of self-respect, if you, you dressed well, if you come across, poised manner. I mean, we all know like what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
just
yeah.
basically,
It's
people will be-
underrated.
yeah.
In that regard, listening. Like, if you think even about, so you mentioned communication, you mentioned sales. Those are basically the bedrock of business and of starting things. If you don't learn how to listen, you tend to give people, when you speak, when you sell, something that no one wants.
100%. You've hit the nail on the head. The core skill of sales is listening.
Like this, like you mentioned the CPD, the word CPD. I'm sure that must have given you some friction back in the day when you were starting. When you said CPD, sorry, not looking for, I hate CPD.
That's just it. And the thing is, you have to learn how to correct by listening to people. What you actually learn is how to develop the message, and the message isn't I'm creating CPD content. It's we make CPD easy. So because the core issue is people don't want to deal with compliance and admin and stress. They want things to be easy, and we make CPD easy.
Sure.
And just to go back to your point, because actually it's such a good one on the sales, right? And the listening. I'm sure you know that famous scene from Wolf of Wall Street where he's like, sell me the spin. And in that indication, at the end of the film, where he's at the conference and he's telling all of those guys, sell me the spin. And if you see what they do, he moves from one to the other. They all start talking about the features of the pen.
Yes.
Immediately.
Yes.
They say this is a nice pen, this is a sleek pen, this pen writes well. But the real question, the best sales tactic, the thing that they should have done has been like, what do you use to write? What do you use a pen for? You need to start by asking questions to the person.
What are you doing? Like sort of the meta question that you wouldn't say verbatim, but is, why would you need this pen?
Exactly. Why would you need this pen?
Why do you need this? Why do you need this pen?
Sure. And the thing is not to actually persuade the person into buying the pen, because you can't. You can't persuade. You don't want. That's not the essence of sales.
You can't convince. I think that's the better word. The persuasion, you will, because you'll find the thing, and then the thing that they didn't know they needed. You know that feeling.
The person will persuade themselves.
Yeah. Okay.
The thing
I
is,
love that.
You can't. You know what? You can't make anyone do anything. But what you can do is ask questions, and then you have information about the pen that they may say, I need something that writes in 50-degree weather, because I work in the desert.
Oh, perfect.
And then,
this one.
Exactly. Then you can say, actually, I don't have the product for you.
True.
That's the ethical, in my opinion. That's the straight up thing to say, is to say, actually, there's no alignment. So let's not waste each other's time.
Sure.
Or the person will say, I'm looking for a pencil. You say, okay.
We don't sell pencils.
Exactly.
Straight, yeah.
Exactly. But people have that grimy view of a salesman where exactly it's that insistent or that persuasion or that convincing. But no, the heart of sales is actually listening, as you said.
And the person will persuade themselves. There was this other idea that I saw the other day of don't convince, inspire. And I feel like that's what you do when you just share your vision. If you just know how to market, I think marketing is now next level sales where it's at scale. When you know how to just share your vision openly, and you are just open about being purposeful and living your purpose, people get inspired. People want to be in the myCAhub community. They don't, because you didn't have to convince them. They were just inspired. They were compelled. They laughed when they saw the shirt, and they're like, "Yeah, that's pretty cool, man." And now they've persuaded themselves, man. So now I wanted to also chat about. So you've now built this the startup, you've actually built from 2021. You've built for scale from the jump, which is a very interesting thing. You mentioned how the vision was always big, the vision was always at least broad, let's say. And so from MVP, minimum viable product, to the thriving business that you have now, you built the business to be able to get big. And I want to talk about strategy. So in school, we learn about strategy. It's all theoretical, but we learn about this thing called strategy. And I really like thought about the fact that you called it myCAhub. You didn't call it CA CPD or CA Toolkits or CA Tech Solutions. You didn't call it that. You called it myCAhub. And for me, that was a stroke of strategic genius, because now there's no need for you to pivot in future if you have a new solution available in your suite. And that is so important, because there was this idea that I got from this other CA. His name's Julius Mujapilo. He's an incredible guy. He's an internal auditor. He says the problem, and this was a personal branding analogy, or rather personal branding concept. The problem with a lot of people, it is an analogy because it's also for business, is they fall in love with the solution, not the problem. And so in his case, in the personal brand example, people, they structure their personal brand. Let's say back in the 19th century, they'll structure their personal brand around horses. So now your business is, or your brand, it's all about horses. Then you start to shine there. You have polish for their hooves, and how you create these saddles, because your business, your brand is all about horses. Enter Henry Ford. Henry Ford knew this from the jump when he started his inventing, that I don't care about horses, I care about transportation. The problem. Now, I wanted to draw attention to the myCAhub strength, the strategic one, that you can pivot and there'll be no brand implications, because you've, from the jump, from when you started, you built it for that level of scale. You can now do all these different solutions. How do you think about strategy, and do you use any of the things you used in school from a strategic perspective?
What a great lead in to this question. The way I think about strategy is firstly, and this is just my own personal perspective.
Yes. Strategy is an art. I must also add that as well.
Definitely. Playing on that point that you mentioned, you don't want to box yourself in too early, right? But, let me be honest, right? It's a great question. There's no real answer, right? You can decide to go very niche, right? So you can actually box yourself in, and that can actually prove to be very lucrative. Or you can decide that in the future,
you can pivot.
Exactly. I can pivot and make things a bit broader.
You can rebrand as well. Yeah.
Exactly. And you can rebrand as well. I think it's actually, you don't want to limit yourself by getting too caught up in the airy-fairies of strategy. It is an art, right? But it's not a science. That's just it. It's an art. It's not a science. You don't know if you put, you can't put 2 units of strategy in and get 3 units of revenue out. Yeah, of revenue out. It doesn't work that way, you know. I think as long as it aligns with your values and your overall corporate values, right? And your vision, your current vision, your vision can change. I think you should be on the right side. You can only really visualize and then execute and then reflect. I think the tricky part where you can get tripped up is too much visualization, which is what strategy tends to get reduced to. And then when the execution comes along, there's no execution of tactics to achieving the strategy. It's just this broad vision of this is what we want. How do we achieve that? How do we get there? That's brought up in the tactics, the operations. There's got to be that execution of the operation, and then that reflection on that. Is this achieving our strategy, or is this taking us in a new direction? Or is this actually just keeping us stagnant? I think when it comes to strategy, there's always going to be different schools of thought. There's going to be different opinions, different, ways of getting there. It's because people have different strategies in their life.
Yeah.
For developing your own strategy, again, for me, the reason I can only speak about myself and myCAhub. And at the beginning, I wanted it to be something much broader than just the CPD. I wanted it to be like the umbrella for CAs, accountants, relating to the chartered accountant, that different things could fall under, hence the brand name, hence the name myCAhub. And in fact, not just CAhub, I wanted that personal, possessive attribute to it, hence the my in front. It's my. It was CAhub, it's myCAhub,
Yeah.
That was the idea. But, if things didn't work out, I'll be just totally honest. If things didn't work out the way, in that way, if there was a terrible strategy, let's say, because CAs don't want to be part of community. The cool thing is that there are some CAs who do want to be part of a community and learn. And I think CAs in general find that they benefit from networking and, and it opens them up to different opportunities and I've just noticed that from our own networking events at myCAhub that you've come to. So
Yes.
Greatly, man. I appreciate your support.
Thank you, man. I love it.
And so the idea is that if I do make that open, then the strategy was if I made that open, then people would come and it would develop into something bigger, more than the original thing, and then take it from there. If my strategy was not correct, and let's say people didn't want to come to the events and people didn't want to, then I'd have to actually re-strategize.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So there's nothing prescriptive about it. It's, I think, entirely down to the person, down to the corporate, down to the founders and their vision and what they want to get out of it. Did anything from school help me? It's been a while since I was in school. We don't talk about stuff like this in school, unfortunately. It's great. If I think back on it, we have market days, which was quite useful. I mean, it was fun. I don't know about useful. It was fun.
Yeah.
It was cool to get a taste, to dip your toe into, marketing and the entrepreneurial venture. Really, it was good. It was good for a very minimal basis. I think, could you learn more? Could you teach more? I don't know. I think it would be mainly for people who are interested. I think you could have like a after-school entrepreneurship club to see people who are interested in that in business. It's not for everyone. I was telling my sister this the other day. I think the main key differential when it comes to entrepreneurship is really temperament and attitude.
Sure.
It's not the quality of your ideas. It's not how intelligent you are. It's not even how persistent you are.
Sure.
It's your temperament and ideas, because a lot of being part of the entrepreneurial journey is uncertainty and a lot of risk, calculated risk, but risk taking and problem solving every day. There's uncertainty and new problems and taking risks every day. And you have to be able to deal with that comfortably, emotionally, mentally and emotionally, and be willing to be in that environment. If you aren't able to do that, if you aren't able to handle that, then I don't think that entrepreneurship is a healthy choice for you. But just simply based on that, it's not based on your career, it's not based on your education, it's got nothing to do with any of that, in my opinion, but basically down to your temperament and attitude and how you deal with that uncertainty and risk on a daily basis.
So there's four models of strategy that we learned during the strategy lectures at the beginning of this year. It's funny, like CTA, it's the first time that I'm like, yo, everything's really applicable, like really, really applicable. But basically, there were these four basic strategy models, which is basically you have your rationale based strategy, which is very structured, very corporate. That's where you do a strategic plan for the whole company at the beginning of the year. You get it approved by the board and you just follow the plan. It's very rigid, very stiff, but very clear. Then you have as well the other three. Second one, I'm not remembering it. No, there were only three actually. So there was the rational, the incremental strategy, which is basically saying we're going to base our strategy off of like the Kaizen principle, 1% small improvements over time. And the last one was the experimental strategy model, which is basically what you've been going through.
Sure. As you've been saying it, that's the one that's resonated the most.
That's the one where you test. You try something, you experiment, and you fail forward, fail for feedback, fail for knowledge. Knowledge is power, failure is power. So actually, that was a great product development lesson that you actually gave us regarding that. But I think, again, it also comes back to, as you said, it's an art. Like what floats your boat as well? It is a very artistic thing. Like,
sure. And I think those first two strategy, the first two that you mentioned, the traditional and then the Kaizen, and then I think, when it comes down to it, a lot of the reasons why those strategies are, and this is just my opinion, developed is because you have external stakeholders you have to be accountable to. And so if someone asked you, what is your strategy? You have to point to a document because you can't just say it's in my head. And, I'm just testing things and trying things. People are like, is this what we pay you for? Is this what the fees are for?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? So there has to be some formalization and some documentation. But I don't know how effective all of that is. I'm just being personally honest. I think you find it a lot in bigger companies or in any situation where people are trying to reduce, where external stakeholders are trying to reduce risk. So you produce a lot of documentation and a lot of fluff, in my opinion, to justify to them, to justify the risks that they are taking with the money that they're spending. But does it actually lead to anything effective? I don't know. I question it. Because, like, bro, how many employees in the organization are reading the strategy document? Or, or
there's three guys. It's the CFO, the CEO, and the COO.
And even if in the development of that strategy, there's so many personal elements that have been incorporated, in my opinion, that lead to personal incentives, So like the CEO or a board, like this is just the basis of this opinion is that those strategies or those decisions don't come out of a vacuum. They come out of people who made those decisions, and people have incentives, and people will always be people. So what individuals are deciding in their own interest that leads to a strategy, a corporate strategy, may not even necessarily be the best thing for that corporation.
True.
To survive or thrive, or to exceed or succeed. But it may be for certain individuals in that organization to get their goals. And this is well known, this is not like revolutionary
this is
stuff.
Logical.
Like, exactly. This is logical.
You think about it,
Exactly, but it's just so it's not put into practice. Like, it's just like when it comes to it, you find there's always these gaps when it comes to real life. Like, how could those things happen with like Steinhoff and VVS, and like how could so many of these catastrophes happen, especially when everybody is meant to be completely ethical and supposed to be regulated and so on and so forth. It's because the trust mechanisms, I think partly the trust mechanisms that people place. So people don't expect your auditor to rob you. You know, people don't expect trust their auditor to not rob them. But that's not what happened. You know.
Well, I mean, on some level, no matter how sophisticated our systems become, there will be someone who wants to bypass them, to circumvent them. There'll always be.
That's just it, you know. The failing point will always be human.
It's human. It's a part of human nature, because one of the fundamental foundations of human nature is that we gravitate towards the highest reward for the least effort. And so that's why crime pays, because there's a law that says you can't do it in this way because of X reasons. It tends to be inconvenient, compliance, etc., all those things. There tends to be that inconvenience, and so you'd rather bypass it and maybe even get paid from bypassing it, but now you've gotten more for less effort.
Well, it just depends. It depends on the opportunity cost. You know, if the opportunity cost was a highly effective functioning justice system where you went to jail for 20 years, then you wouldn't do it. You know, you'd make that decision. You'd weigh up that decision, the costs, and say like, nah. That's why my opinion is that when we speak about ethics and stuff like that, it's very la-di-da, because it's totally subjective. Somebody's personal view of what is ethical in a situation is totally based on them, and they've got this own narrative and extenuating circumstances and so on. So we can't ever actually depend, in my opinion, on the individual to make an ethical decision.
Sure.
What you can do, what you do have control over, is the punishment. You know what people hate, people are disincentivized.
Also, the reward as well.
You don't think? You can offer a reward, but people.
Look, I mean, like performance management in a corporate is an example of using the lever of reward.
People respond more to pain than pleasure.
True.
So people, the response to pain receptors I think it's like ×2. It's twice as acute as the gain you get from a pleasurable experience. So people value pain more than pleasure. People like view it on a quantifiable scale, and so you just need very harsh penalties that are actually enforced. You need to say like, if you actually caught or viewed as this, then it's 20 years. I think part of the reason though that there hasn't been such is because other people are worried about what those people would say. Do you know what I'm saying? It's part of the structural the structural issues that others have allowed to pervade to get to that stage where things could happen. If at the first indication, so I read like in Singapore, politicians there are automatically accountable. So by default have to account for things in their lifestyle. Like they undergo like automatic lifestyle audits, right? Rather than someone coming and asking, how could you afford this? They have to justify beforehand how they can afford anything on their salary that they're receiving. It's like guilty until presumed innocent. Do you know what I'm saying? Almost. Because of the level of care and people are trusting in you, the level of trust that has been placed in those individuals. I think if we had more of that, you know what I'm saying? Like,
systemized accountability.
Exactly. It would let's see what the outcomes of those would be. I'm not saying it's the panacea.
Here's the thing, and I shared the idea with you the other day, but like I think a lot of the problem in our conversation in South Africa is that, especially around government, is that we go from accountability inwards towards responsibility. So if we think about accountability and responsibility, which are these values that we value in corporate governance, in the world, I feel like they're very closely related when it comes to ethics and the way you live. But basically, accountability, if we define it, is who answers to this that's been done. Responsibility, the problem with this is who's going to do something about it. And even in the example of like an accounting student, it's easy to be accountable as a student because you're the only one who has access to your student portal. And you receive the marks. So who answers to it? You. Tough luck. It's your report card, it's your CV, it's no one else's. But then where it starts to get shaky is responsibility. So what are you going to do about it? No, but there was the teacher who did this for my test and blah, blah, blah. And there's all these excuses and all this back and forth. But at the end of the day, responsibility is the thing that solves problems, not accountability. In South Africa, we tend to focus and dwell and stay in the accountability conversation. So all we talk about is like, oh, this government. Firstly, we point fingers. That's where it starts. Point fingers, government. The problem with our government is that no one's accountable. They don't even get fined for their what, blah, blah, blah. But then the problem is, whenever you are pointing a finger at someone else, there's always three fingers pointing back at you. And you've got to start asking, I think, not from accountability to responsibility, but the other way around. Responsibility onwards. What are we going to do about it? And I think that is the real crux of everything. It's what are we going to do about this thing? And that's what I really think is, like, even if we think about load shedding, right? Yeah, we'll go that far. I mean, obviously I didn't have a part to play in load shedding, right? But can I really still, to this day, in 40 years' time, complain about it if I've done nothing to try and fix the situation in 40 years? So now that's the time where you and I are at the top of the hierarchy, effectively, and we've had enough time to try something to fix these problems. Can we still say you point fingers when we've done fuck off for 40 years?
It sounds like a tragedy of the commons, which is when there's a public use area like a park or a public use space, but no one's accountable or responsible for taking care of it. It goes to waste. It goes to it's trashed, and people take advantage of it. People wouldn't treat their own property that way, but treat the public property that way because nobody's accountable, or they don't see that responsibility for it. And so it really sounds to me like a tragedy of the commons. When nobody takes accountability or nobody wants to be responsible, then everybody loses. And so if you're saying, like, what's going to happen in 40 years, like, the main thing, like, is someone on an individual level has to begin taking first. You may not take accountability, but take responsibility.
Maybe not accountability, but definitely like, who's gonna do something about it?
It's my responsibility. Yeah,
and
I agree.
My wife, the CA that I spoke to, Julius, he said it so eloquently. He said responsibility is responsibility. It's the ability to respond, and therefore everyone's responsible because you can do something. Accountability is the ability to account for that which was responded to. We don't get there until we've responded. So, yeah, man. Conundrums. Bro, if you could go back to first year, second year, high school, Muhammad, what would you tell him?
I would, if I had to speak to my high school counterpart, myself as a high school student, Give me 1 second. Let me think.
Please do.
You know, I would tell my high school counterpart to not worry about how things are going to end up, right? I would say to focus on the process. But can I be honest? Like, I did a pretty, if I think back on it, I wouldn't really have changed anything, like from high school. I think that, the choices that I made and the decisions that I made led to me being the person I am today. And I totally accept the person I am today. I actually like the person I am today. I know myself and I understand myself and I like myself. And it took a lot to get here, and all of those decisions and actions along the way led to me being in this position. And so I wouldn't change anything. I really wouldn't change anything. I know a lot of people who don't know themselves and who don't understand themselves. And I even know some people who don't like themselves.
Sure.
And I wouldn't change that for the world.
Yo, man. So keep doing it effectively.
Sure. Exactly. Like for me, I would just say, I wouldn't say anything, like you just have to live your life. It was literally through living my life and being exposed to those different experiences and being who I was. And I'll be honest, I'm a pretty different person. I think especially in terms of some of my outlooks, definitely a lot of my worldviews have changed throughout the years. Things that haven't changed about me, I'd say, are like some core traits that were developed in childhood, like some values. I like recognition. I really like the freedom and independence from a kid. I like being able to do what I wanted and not being told what to do. And I enjoyed art as a kid too, creativity. So I would really just say, you just got to be yourself. And I think that's just it. I was
performing a bit.
Naturally, no, it's definitely in varsity, and like I was in that process of developing who I was.
Yes.
In learning about who I was. And coming to understand myself. There was some aspects of performance, but that's natural.
That's
I
natural,
think.
when you're young.
Exactly. That's how you have to live life and learn all of that, and you have to lie and perform and fail and like to hopefully learn that that's not who you want to be. So I wouldn't change anything. I would just say, you know what, you have to live life, continue living life. I wouldn't, because I'm happy with who I am today.
Yeah, bro. Yeah. Keep going, man. Keep going. Keep living. I think always, with that hindsight vision, you've got obviously so much wisdom and so much experience, so it's hard to say much, but being more there, I think that's something that I could say. Be more there, more present is always it's always an enhancer to experience. So yeah, man, just keep going, keep doing it, guys. If you have not already, please, please follow this. Yo, this is incredible. Also, please note that there is the hottest accounting merch, finance merch, linked in the descriptions, as well as Muhammad's LinkedIn, of course. Muhammad, before we leave, actually, like, what's your favorite merch? I'll actually tell everyone my favorite, most wittiest one. I don't have it, and I wouldn't wear it because it would be weird. But it was that one where there's this girl, right? I'm painting the picture for you guys. There's this girl. She's beautiful and she's corporate. And she's holding this stack of books. And the stack of books are labeled IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards. And then there's a speech bubble where she says, "I have standards." Which is just so witty, so good, bro. What's your favorite?
I like that one.
Yeah.
I also like, there's another one with a woman that says, misstatement says it's immaterial, because from audit, you get immaterial misstatements, and this is a pun on misstatement, a woman, and she says it's immaterial, and she's got her finger over her lips, And she's got a purse full of cash. I like that one too.
There's like 1,000 more, guys. Please check his merch out, and it will be linked in the description.
Yes, myCAhub.co.za/merch.
myCAhub.co.za/merch. I hope that it does not end, but that it begins in CASA. Muhammad, thank you, brother.
Alunga, it's been a pleasure. I'm always happy to chat to you. Thank you for having me on the Road to CA podcast.